Part 1. The strange nature of understanding. Think about the last time you truly understood something. Not the moment you learned it, but the moment you actually understood it. The moment it settled into a different place inside you, acquired a deeper place. There's the gap between those two moments, isn't there? Between learning and understanding, between knowing and seeing. And that gap is not filled with information, it's filled with time, experience, distance from the moment itself. Which raises something strange. If understanding requires distance, if we often only see clearly after the fact, then what does that say about right now? What does it say about the decisions you're making today, the things you're certain about today, the way you're reading your own life today? Maybe today by its very nature, is the place with the least perspective. Not because you're not intelligent, not because you're not trying, but simply because you're in it. You're inside it, and when you're inside something, you can only see what that something shows you. Tomorrow, not today, but the vantage point, stands slightly outside today, and from there things look different. That's not mystical, that's just the geometry of perspective. Part 2: what standing outside looks like. Let me give you an ordinary example. Think of time you were upset, genuinely, deeply upset, about something that a year later you could barely explain to someone else. Not because your feelings weren't real, they were, but because something about the closeness of it made it enormous, made it fill the entire room of your mind. There was no wall to lean against, no window to look out of, just the experience, vast, immediate, overwhelming. And then gradually time passed, you moved slightly away from it. And from that new position, you started to see edges, proportion, context. You started to see the room, not just the ceiling pressing down on you. Now here's the part I want you to really think about. You didn't become smarter between then and now. You didn't gain new information about the event itself. What you gained was distance, perspective, a different angle of light. And that changed everything. So when we ask what does tomorrow know that today doesn't, perhaps part of the answer is this. Tomorrow knows the shape of today. Today can only feel its weight. Part 3: the problem of living forward. There's a line often attributed to a Danish philosopher, the idea that life can only be understood backward, but it must be lived forward. I think about that often, because it contains a real difficulty. We don't get to pause the film of our lives and rewind. We're always in the middle of it, always in a scene with no script, no director, no awareness, yet of what this moment is setting into motion. We make choices, and the choices make things, but the things they make, we often won't see for months, years, sometimes not in our lifetimes. Think of a friendship that ended. At the time, it might have felt clear, a falling out, a misunderstanding, a drift. But looking back from a certain distance, you begin to notice something else, a pattern in yourself, a tendency, a way of needing people, or pushing them away, that had been quietly running underneath the whole thing. You couldn't see it then, not because it wasn't there, it was, but because you were inside it, living forward through it. And that's not a failure of intelligence. That's just a condition of being a person in time. What changes is not the facts of what happened. What changes is your ability to hold them in a larger frame. That larger frame, that's what tomorrow eventually offers. And the question worth sitting with it: is there any way to borrow even a small amount of that frame before tomorrow arrives? Part 4: when we walk into the same wall. Let me ask you something else. Have you ever noticed yourself in the middle of a familiar frustration and suddenly felt a strange sense of recognition? Not recognition of the situation exactly, but recognition of something in yourself. A quiet awareness that you've been here before. Not here, not this specific room. this specific argument, this specific moment. But this feeling, this pattern, this particular flavor of confusion or sadness or stuckness, and there's something especially strange about those moments. Because in that fraction of a second, you can almost see yourself from the outside, almost step back and say, wait, I know what this is. But then, and this is the part worth really noticing, the moment usually passes, the closeness returns, the fullness of the present pulls you back in, and you continue through the wall instead of around it. Why? Why do we all so often understand what we're doing and still keep doing it? I think part of it is this. Understanding, real understanding, is not the same as information. You can have the information, you can even know it intellectually, but to actually see it, to let it land in the place where behavior lives, that takes something more. It takes a kind of spaciousness inside yourself. And that spaciousness is exactly what closeness destroys. When you're deep in something, there's no spaciousness. There's only the thing. And so even the understanding you do have, even the part of you that recognizes the pattern, gets crowded out. This is why people repeat things they swore they'd never repeat. Not because they forgot, but because remembering isn't the same as having space to act differently. Tomorrow, the perspective of tomorrow, creates that space. Not by giving you new information, but by moving the walls back slightly, by letting the room breathe. And what becomes visible when the room breathes is the room itself. Part 5, consequences we cannot yet see. Here's another angle on this. Right now, in your life, there are consequences for me. Things you did a week ago, a year ago, a decade ago, slowly working their way through the world toward you, like water moving through a rock, not rushing, just moving, patient, inevitable. You cannot see them yet, not because you're not looking, but because there is a delay between cause and effect that is built into the nature of things. The seed doesn't show itself above ground the day you plant it. A habit doesn't reveal its full weight the day you form it. A conversation, careless or kind, doesn't always show its consequences in the room where it happened. And yet, those consequences are coming. They're already in motion. Tomorrow knows about them. Not because tomorrow is magical, not because the future is predetermined, but because tomorrow will be closer to the point where these things become visible, where the water finally reaches the surface, where the seed becomes something you can hold in your hands and say, ah, that's what that was. This is a slightly uncomfortable thought. If you let it sit, because it means that whatever you're doing right now, however small, however habitual, however unremarkable it feels, it is setting something in motion. And today cannot tell you what. Only the distance of tomorrow will reveal that. Part 6, the question behind the question. I want to slow down even further now, because there is something underneath all of this that I think is worth naming. We've been talking about perspective, about distance, about the gap between living through something and understanding it. But there's quite a question hiding inside all of that, and it's this. If perspective is what creates understanding, then what is understanding exactly? Not as a concept, not as a dictionary definition, but as an experience. What does it actually feel like in the body, in the mind, in the quiet of a moment to truly understand something? I think it feels like relief, or like something that was tight becoming loose, like a fist opening, like the view from somewhere higher than where you've been standing. It doesn't always feel good. Sometimes understanding is painful. Sometimes you see something about yourself that you've been carefully not seeing for a long time. And the moment it becomes visible, there's a kind of grief in it. But underneath even that grief, there is something else. Something that feels like solid ground, because at least now you can see where you stand. And maybe that's what tomorrow offers most. Not answers, not solutions, not some better version of things. Just ground, just the ability to see where you are. Which, if you are, think about it, is the beginning of everything else. Part 7. The person who learns and the person who doesn't. Consider two people going through the same difficult experience, the same loss, the same failure, the same period of confusion and pain. A few years later, one of them has somehow metabolized it, not erased it. You can still see the mark of it in them, but it's become something else, something like depth, something that makes them quieter in a certain kind of way, and more present, and more careful about what they say. The other person is still carrying it, still raw, still explaining in the same way they explained it in the beginning, still just as close to it as they were when it happened. What's the difference between them? It's not intelligence, it's not willpower, it's not even time, because the same amount of time passed for both of them. I think the difference is something like this. One person allowed the perspective, allowed the distance to do its work, allowed themselves to move slightly away from the experience, not to abandon it, not to deny it, but to see it. The other stayed inside it, held it close, maybe because letting it move away felt like losing something, because maybe because the closeness felt like honesty, maybe because no one ever showed them that understanding is not the same as proximity. And this is the thing worth really sitting with. Staying close to something is not the same as understanding it. Sometimes it's actually the opposite. Part 8. Borrowed distance. So here we are. Tomorrow knows things today doesn't. But we can't simply jump to tomorrow. We can't skip the living of our lives to get to the part where we understand them. What we can do maybe is borrow a little of that distance. Not manufactured certainty, not false perspective, not pretending to know things we don't, but a genuine willingness to move even slightly away from the immediacy of what we're inside. To ask if I were looking at this moment from here away, what would I notice that I'm not noticing now? To ask what is this pattern I keep recognizing and what would it look like if I actually gave it space instead of explaining it? To ask what am I carrying right now that tomorrow will have put down? These are not easy questions. They don't have clean answers, but the asking of them, the genuine, unhurried asking, does something to the way you hold things. It creates, if only briefly, a little spaciousness. And in that spaciousness, something that couldn't be seen before sometimes become visible. Part 9. What this isn't. Before we close, I want to say something clearly. This is not an argument for detachment, for removing yourself from your life, for becoming a cool observer of your own experience and calling that wisdom. People who have done that, who have managed to feel nothing deeply, to hold everything at arm's length, cultivate a kind of numbed perspective, they don't understand more. They understand less because they have removed themselves from the very material that understanding is made of. You have to go through things. You have to be inside them. You have to feel the ceiling pressing down and the walls too close and the room without windows. That's not a mistake. That's how life is lived. The perspective only means something because you were inside the experience first. The most understanding is only possible because today was actually lived. So this is not about standing back. It's about allowing yourself gently, without forcing it, to be occasionally both inside and slightly outside. Present in the experience and also occasionally watching yourself. in it with a quiet, curious eye, not to judge, not to fix, just see. Closing. What does tomorrow know that today doesn't? I've been sitting with that question for the length of this conversation, and I still don't think I can answer it cleanly. I'm not sure a clean answer is what the question is asking for, but here's what I think I do know. There's a version of you that exists slightly further along, not wiser by accident, not changed by magic, but changed by the quiet accumulation of perspective, by distance, by having allowed the rooms of your experience to breathe. That version of you sees today differently than you do right now. Not because they have more information, but because the information you already have settled, you already has settled into a different arrangement. Taking a different shape, becomes something you can actually hold, instead of something that holds you. The question, what does tomorrow knows, is really a question about the conditions under which understanding becomes possible. And what I hope you've learned, what I hope you're leaving with isn't an answer. I hope you're leaving with a slightly different relationship to the question itself. Because sometimes the most important thing understanding does is change the quality of your attention. It slows you down. It makes you look twice. It makes you say, maybe I don't fully see this yet. Maybe I'm still too close. Maybe there's something here. In this conversation, this pattern, this decision, that I'm right in the middle of. And the middle is not the best place to see from. And that kind of humility, quiet, unforced, generally curious, that's not weakness, that's the beginning of seeing. This has been Reflections of Mosy. Take your time with whatever just surfaced. There's no rush to understand it. That too will come with distance.